So I know time is limited today, so let me just get started. Many of you are probably familiar with HathiTrust shared print program, but I think as we look towards our future, it's really important to consider where we started. So launched in July 2017, HathiTrust program had a mission to steward print copies of all HathiTrust digital holdings. Our program was focused on securing retention commitments for print holdings that mirror book titles in our digital library. In addition, we wanted to maintain a lendable print collection distributed among our HathiTrust member collections. We also wanted a program that is supported by and provides benefits to all HathiTrust members, not just our retention libraries. And we hope to build on existing shared print and resource sharing agreements and avoid disturbing members' other affiliations. To date, our program has committed to retain around 18.4 million monograph volumes, and these volumes represent more than 5.6 million individual titles in our digital library, which is about 76% of our digital library monographs. At the end of August 2020, HathiTrust began a process to gather feedback from our then 77 retention libraries regarding their views and opinions about our program. The goal was not only to learn about satisfaction levels, but to also discuss and identify potential new services and enhancements for the program. Our assessment was conducted through a survey of our retention libraries and numerous discussion groups. The survey was HathiTrust's first opportunity to hear directly from retention libraries regarding their opinions on the goals, satisfaction, and potential new services of our program. Very simply said, we learned a lot. Findings ranged from member satisfaction with our program to ideas that they have for enhancing the program. The full report is available on our website if you're interested in more. But for the sake of time, I wanted to focus on a few key points from our assessment that are specifically related to our future plans around phase 3. First, the shared print goal of preserving both the print and digital collection remains important, and it's one of the main reasons why libraries participate. Preservation continues to be seen as a unique value of our program because of our connection between the digital and the print. However, the lack of verification and condition assurances on commitments is of concern to members when thinking about long-term preservation of shared print items. At the time of our survey and focus group discussions, we also raised an idea that our shared print advisory committee had been considering around a sub-collection of our commitments that would essentially be dark commitments. This meant that these commitments would have no access unless for redigitization needs or other emergencies. During these preliminary discussions with our stakeholders and governance groups, we heard that while there's general interest in developing this sort of idea of dark commitments, the idea was challenging in many ways. So instead, the idea to focus on non-circulating items like those in special collections or collections of distinctions would be a better place to start. And this brings us where we are today and why I'm here. So where we are, aside from presently presenting at PAN and you all hearing me speak for one of two presentations you'll see me at today, at HathiTrust, we guide our work around two things: our strategic directions and our statement of values. Our 2019-2023 strategic directions outlines themes of transformation, enhance, and empower, all of which are needed to realize our organizational mission. Our more recently developed statement of value stresses values such as trust, access, resilience, and leadership. It is incumbent that all the work we undertake aligns with our strategic themes and are centralized in our values. With this in mind, and building what we learned from our assessment, I'm happy to announce the third phase of our shared print program, which will be called our unique non-circulating collection. This new phase will focus on securing commitments on unique HathiTrust single part monographs that are non-circulating, and it will start with items in the public domain. Our current program, which gives us all the benefits derived from lending, does have the trade-off of an increased risk of damage and loss. Phase 3 will be transformational in how HathiTrust thinks about shared print through its acknowledgement and attempting at addressing the higher levels of risk associated with circulating shared print items. By building on the program with a new Phase 3 that addresses these concerns, HathiTrust will build trust and resilience in our program for our members and future scholars. By focusing on unique content across HathiTrust member collection, this project also empowers our members by helping them begin to identify unique materials in their own collections. Together, through a coordinated effort, HathiTrust libraries can guarantee print preservation of a large swath of at-risk public domain items. It will enhance HathiTrust's ability to have a higher impact on where we focus our preservation efforts through risk mitigation and looking across the membership to target unique items as a priority and align with both our values and strategic directions. So now you're probably wondering, what exactly is Phase 3? So let me get into some really high-level specifics. As I mentioned, in order to mitigate concerns of risk and more fully guarantee long-term preservation of unique content across our members, this phase of our program focuses on unique single-part monographs held in the HathiTrust Digital Library that are non-circulating or in library use, in special collections, or one of our retention libraries is willing to make them non-circulating. Unique for this program is defined as being held at 1 to 2 member libraries. And to start, as I mentioned before, items will also be held in the public domain. Another new requirement of this phase will include condition and validation checks for titles being committed. Phase 3 will intentionally be an incremental phase where each new step builds on the previous. So for part 1, as I've been talking about primarily, we're going to secure commitments on unique public domain items, but we're going to start with retention libraries. So libraries that are already retention libraries. Part 2 would expand that and start securing commitments on these unique items with current non-retention libraries. Part 3 would begin to secure commitments on unique and in copyright items. Changing the landscape of shared print from print access to digital will certainly take time. And given this, HathiTrust will be using this iterative approach in including these new commitments. So as I mentioned, we're going to start Phase 3, Part 1, but we're going to start using pilot libraries. We hope to start recruiting for pilot libraries from our retention libraries from our membership just later this year. The pilot libraries will actually act as partners with HathiTrust to help us better scope the service and define policies and procedures. There are many details I'm admitting here, and we'll certainly be sharing them with our members and you all as this project progresses. But for today, I do want to turn it back to our strategic directions, which specify that HathiTrust will emphasize work designed to transform how libraries work together to manage scholarly resources that their users require, enhance the quality of HathiTrust digital collections and services to provide more meaningful access to scholars and learners, and empower our organization and membership to tackle major strategic challenges. HathiTrust Shared Print's Phase 3 program, the unique non-circulating collection, will do just that. It will help start shifting shared print towards a different type of access by addressing concerns around risk. Even more importantly, and like all of our shared print projects, Phase 3 will help HathiTrust execute our mission to contribute to research and scholarship and the common good by collaboratively collecting, organizing, preserving, communicating, and sharing the record of human knowledge. This inclusion of non-circulating materials into our program for Phase 3 carries with it the potential to be transformational in how libraries start to think about shared print. The unique non-circulating collection is transformational in the inclusion of non-circulating materials into a shared print program of our size and begins to build out a network of certainty in ways that currently doesn't exist. As you can imagine, this is not a program that can happen overnight. The creation of a fully accessible, unique, non-circulating shared print phase will take time to do correctly. Still, we feel the long-term value for our members and for future scholars far outweighs the time and challenges needed to overcome in order to revolutionize collections in shared print. I also recognize we're not the only program looking at this. And so I'm extremely excited to see where the future of shared print takes us and to see how we can all ensure greater future access to these materials, regardless of how that access occurs. Now, I recognize I have just thrown a lot at you, and I will end blabbering and stop sharing my screen and see if there's any questions. I do want to offer, though, real quickly, that I will be at the Pan water cooler on Monday, and will be available then to ask any questions, because I know we have time, limited time today.
Thank you, Heather. We do have some questions, and the first question is, and I presume this is talking about the retention commitments, is how will these be recorded? Will there be a new 583 subfield F? Seems important to know that these are dark.
Yeah, so just to be clear, the dark idea was a previous idea. And so these items that are non-circulating, non-in-library use for phase 3, our non-circulating collection, are accessible still in library use. So whatever the participating libraries commitment to non-circulating or in library use means, that is what will be followed. But to specifically answer your question, we will have requirements of participating libraries to include this in the 583.
Thank you, Heather. And the next question is, sorry if I missed this, but how will the unique materials be identified?
Right, so HathiTrust, our libraries are required to send us updated print holdings, information that we use to assess fees and other services that we offer. And so we are starting there, and we are using our members' print holdings information to identify unique. So that's why I prefaced I defined unique as unique across the HathiTrust membership. That's where we're starting with this program.
Thanks, Heather. And then another question is, who would be the digitizing sponsor? The retention library who is volunteering?
No, so these are items that are already digitized. So the digitized record may not have been submitted or may not have been ingested, provided by the library that's making the retention commitment. So there's sort of two, it might not always align, so it'll vary. But right now we are starting, continuing with our current shared print focus of aligning what's already in our digital library and then getting retention commitments on those.
Thank you, Heather. We do have another question that's just come into the chat, and is, if a library has to discard print, is there a model for one-time purchase, perpetual access, no access fees? No annual fees, sorry.
I'm not sure I completely understand the question, but if it's sort of alluding to this idea of a library, something that's available through HathiTrust more generally, and your library needs to withdraw something for maybe preservation issues, what I can say is that HathiTrust is working very hard on figuring out access to materials for preservation for Section 108. And while we don't have the ability now, it is something that we're definitely working for. But it is outside of the shared print work. It's greater than that, if I understood that question correctly.
Yeah, if the person who asked the question wants to follow up and clarify it, and like Heather said, she will be at the water cooler to answer some further questions if people have them.
And I'll certainly, I have to present next again, but I'll certainly be on Pan the rest of the day, so I can continue to respond to questions via chat too.
Perfect. And I can see someone actually is putting some more information regarding some of the questions in the document, Heather. So in the chat, so I presume that might be someone off SPAC, or someone's putting some additional detail in the questions document.
Okay.
There is a follow-up actually to that last question. Say discarded because of space planning, title XYZ, purchase E only at one price.
So I'm not sure I can actually answer this question. There's no capabilities now for a library to do that through HathiTrust. But I will say we are starting with this program for items in the public domain. So any of these items can be accessible right now already. You can't, download is very different for that, so, but there is no purchase option.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? And they say, thank you, Heather. Any other questions before we move on to the next presenter, which also happens to be Heather?
Just for half of it.
Yeah, just for half of it, yeah. Okay, great. If you do have questions that occur to you after the fact, you can always still put them into the chat or into the questions and comments document. So we are going to move on now to Heather again, and she's going to be leading a discussion of topics and issues raised during last month's California Digital Library, Center for Research Libraries, and HathiTrust, or CCH for short, Collaborative Summit. And joining Heather is going to be Alison Wohlers, who is UC and West Shared Print Program Manager. So thank you, Heather and Alison.
Great. I just want to make sure you can see my screen again.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, so let's get started. I will say just at the start, we shifted a little bit and realized rather than focus entirely on issues and things that came out of the summit, it might be good to actually step back and tell you where we all are today, because I will say this year, I feel like our collaboration achieved a lot. And a lot was missed, right? We've all had really hectic years. And so we thought revisiting some of that might be really useful, especially if there's newer people here to shared print and our collaboration. So let's get started. There we go. So exactly 2 years ago, almost today at PAN, we announced the California Digital Library, Center for Research Library, and HathiTrust collaboration, and our plan to build on work by the shared print community to improve the infrastructure supporting shared print. Our vision for the collaboration is really that the future of print collections is shared. Our goal is actually to gather the threads of the broader community's considerable efforts around shared print and to advance shared print's transition to a new phase of integration and interoperability, one of which that has shared print embedded into the life cycle. Since then, our collaboration has been extremely busy working on bringing this vision forward. And I do want to say that as both Alison and I are talking, we will be providing links in the chat for you all if you want to learn more about specifically what we're talking about. So then in 2020, in order to assist the community in building a collective collection that represents the true depth and breadth of our individual collections, we realized that we needed comprehensive, actionable data, equitable access to effective tools to use and analyze that data, and collective action at scale. So in order to begin to build this knowledge, connect our collections across the ecosystem, and start to embed shared print in the collection's life cycle, more on that in a little bit, our first quick win of the collaboration was to develop the collection comparison tool. This tool was actually launched a year ago. Today, we just verified that this morning. And this new collection comparison tool allows us to take print, serial, and journal holdings data, compare it against shared print commitments across North America, as well as selected trusted digital archives, those like JSTOR and HathiTrust. And the tool then allows you to compare these things in order to make data-driven decisions in managing all of our collections. Since its launch, the tool has been used by many programs and individual libraries to make more informed collection management decisions. So since our founding and our focus on launching the tool, the collaboration has also worked on developing the shared print in the collection's lifecycle document. This document envisions how to embed shared print into the collection's lifecycle in the areas of selection and acquisition, processing and cataloging, shelving, discovery, resource sharing, and assessment and collection management. It was developed by working with experts and the broader community to craft a vision of embedding shared print in the collections lifecycle. For the sake of time, we can't delve really deeply into the document, but we do encourage you to view it as this presentation continues, because it will continue to come up. This document actually represents a first draft of the shared print community's vision for embedding shared print into the lifecycle, the collections lifecycle. So woven, I do want to mention that woven into all of our thinking about shared print's role in the lifecycle collection is the essential lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion. The intention of this document is to actually be a living document. Since it was first posted and shared, it has been updated and commented on by many of you. And we really encourage you and continue to add to it and build to it, because we do enhance it with what you all said. We also use this document as a foundation for our first ever CCH Summit, which I'm going to introduce Alison now to talk about more in detail. Alison?
Thanks, Heather. Hi, everyone. I'm Alison Wohlers, the Shared Print Program Manager at California Digital Library, and it is my pleasure to take over from Heather and tell you a little bit about this summit that occurred just last year in early December. And my apologies to those of you who have already attended a post-summit webinar. There will be a little bit of repetition, but that can be good. So with the summit, we aim to both highlight all that the shared print community has accomplished thus far, as well as think into the future of how we can realize the vision of embedding shared print across the collections lifecycle. We wanted to spark new partnerships that could move the needle from vision to implementation. Slide, please. Thanks, Heather. To achieve those goals, we needed a real range of individuals and organizations to participate, both those who had been heavily steeped in shared print and those who may not have been directly connected to shared print efforts previously, but have expertise or technical capacity in library services that we need in this conversation. This was an important step in overcoming organizational and functional area siloing that has been a limiting factor to some extent to the effectiveness of shared print. So that is what drove the range of participants you see outlined on this slide. We, of course, invited delegations from the Federation level shared print organizations, Rosemont and the Partnership. We also invited delegations from library service and technology providers. And those service provider delegations really came from a wide spectrum of commercial companies, nonprofit organizations, library collaborations, and the space in between those categories. When we developed the initial vision for shared print in the collections lifecycle that Heather discussed just moments ago, we drew upon the expertise of library expert practitioners from across the domains we mapped for the lifecycle. So we invited those experts as well to the summit to bring their subject area expertise and experience in interrogating and refining that vision originally. Finally, we knew we were going to miss important people and that we couldn't send targeted invitations to everyone who would be able to contribute to this conversation. And so we also sent an at-large invitation to the Print Archive Network listserv and got a great range of individuals who attended, from library staff to deans to additional service providers. It was fantastic. So overall, there were over 90 individuals who participated across the 2 days of the summit. And really, I can't say enough that a strength of the summit ended up being the diversity of experience among the participants. Slide, please. So the summit was intentionally structured to be a cumulative experience, with each component leading into and building on the next. So we moved from a more general discussion of the current status of shared print and the vision for shared print in the collections lifecycle to a set of very specific lightning talks from service providers and shared print delegations about what they are currently working on, what they anticipate working on, and where that fits into the vision of the lifecycle. This allowed all of us to begin to map the landscape of current and potential work. Later on in the summit, a panel of experts responded to the preceding sessions to begin a conversation with summit attendees around what's not being addressed. What are our gaps? All of this culminated at the end of the second day of the summit with expressions of action and learning, where we all took the concepts that emerged through the summit and began to shape them into tangible next steps to operationalize our vision. Slide, please. So themes from the summit really spanned a whole bunch of different areas. There was the need to pursue shared open standards and targeted metadata improvement, investing greater resources earlier in the life cycle, like selection, acquisitions, cataloging, to themes on the overall need, again, to overcome organizational and functional area silos in order to find effective and sustainable solutions. And as I just mentioned, we concluded the summit with expressions of learning in action, which reinforced the goals and many of the themes that emerged and represented tangible, time-bounded steps that delegations and individuals, some individuals also made expressions of action, committed to on behalf of their organizations. In terms of next steps, at this point, the CCH collaboration is continuing to work on fulfilling a communication plan for disseminating and building on the concepts that came out of the summit. And in fact, we do have a webinar next week on Monday at 8 a.m. Pacific time to get into more detail about what you have just heard me describe in this short presentation. We will also be, per one of our expressions of action, because we did also provide or make expressions of action, we'll also be coordinating follow-ups on all expressions of action. So reconvening the delegations and individuals who made commitments and helping to track progress and facilitate partnerships and identification of resources, just keeping that conversation going. And we are not alone in all of this activity following the summit. We know that there are a lot of attendees and organizations that are pursuing their actions and also even starting other conversations at their institutions around themes that emerged during the summit. And I'll just conclude by saying we are always looking for ways to bring more individuals and organizations into this work. So please don't hesitate to reach out if you want to get involved. And with that, I'm going to pause and just see if there are any questions. And I'll mention that while we didn't get into the themes, we will be at the water cooler tomorrow and would love to dig into that with folks.
Thank you, Alison and Heather. We don't have any questions in the chat or the document currently, but feel free to submit them because we do have another couple of we have some space that we can certainly answer anything that you might have. And again, there will be opportunities later on if people think of questions later on, and the water cooler will be on Monday as well.
And I'll put a little plug in. If you haven't checked out the tool yet, please do. And we'd really love to hear your feedback if you have used the tool, because we're looking at it again this year. It's been out a year, so we always appreciate feedback. You can reach out to any of us.
Okay, well, I'm not going to prolong any kind of awkward silences, so let's just move on to the next one. And again, thank you both, Alison and Heather, for your presentations, and look forward to hearing more about your efforts in future forums. We do have a request, actually. Could someone put a link to information about the tool in the CCH tool in the chat, please?
I can take care of that. Yep.
Perfect, thank you. So our next presenter is going to be our final update presentation, and it's going to be from Susan Stearns, who is the Executive Director of the Eastern Academic Scholars Trust. Susan is going to be discussing plans for expanding the collection scope of EAST, resource sharing and collection analysis. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Matthew. Give me a moment here just to share my screen, and we will get going.
Thank you.
Let me know if you're seeing it okay.
Just fine. Thanks, Susan.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. Well, good day, everyone. Just a reminder for those of you who may not be familiar with the Eastern Academic Scholars Trust, or EAST program. We are a shared print program with 82 members, primarily academic and research libraries in 13 states in the Eastern US. Today, our collective collection numbers almost 10 million monographs, representing about 7.5 unique titles, and just over 29,000 serials and journals titles. Before I begin, I want to plant the seeds of a few questions for you to consider during my presentation, and I'm hoping there will be time at the end to revisit these. And feel free during my presentation to respond to any of these in chat or on the document that Matthew has referenced. First, do these initiatives overlap or complement work that's currently being undertaken at your institution or within your shared print program? And if so, how might we best collaborate? For those of you that are engaged in the marvelous work of the CCH Collaborative that Heather and Alison just described, how might we best feed into that work in the future? And finally, what else would you like to see programs such as EAST do in the three areas that, as Matthew mentioned, I'm going to be covering in the EAST update today: collection analysis, special collections, and access. A bit of background, in late 2020, not unlike HathiTrust, EAST undertook its first formal program assessment of our members. We actually reported on the details of that assessment as part of a panel discussion at PAN last January, so a year ago's PAN forum, and the slides from that presentation are available on the CRL site. Following that assessment and the analysis of the assessment, the EAST Executive Committee agreed to form working groups to follow up on three main areas of focus from the assessment: the proposals for any future group collection analysis work that EAST would undertake, the potential for expanding EAST to include special collection content, and ways in which EAST could better facilitate expanding access to the collective collection. And I will be focusing today's EAST update on discussing these three working groups in a little more detail. I want to start with the Collections Analysis Working Group. As part of the program assessment, the majority of EAST member libraries expressed some level of interest in making further commitments to retain monograph titles. A broad collection analysis was deemed the best approach, but there is also interest in focusing on subject areas a particular library may be interested in collecting, or only on materials acquired since the original cutoff date for the first round of our collection analysis work, since the EAST retention model included only those titles published prior to 2011. Collection analysis was also deemed a way to better understand ways to expand access to a diverse and inclusive collection. This working group has focused on addressing three major issues. First, what content should be included in the analysis? Circulating print monographs only versus including special collection materials. And I'll talk about that in just a moment. Should we include the entire corpus of that content or only selected portions? And if the latter, what should that selection be based on? Second, how shall we shape the retention model? Will we follow our earlier work and develop a single set of criteria for retention across the group? Or do we provide latitude for more local flexibility and decision-making? And in either case, do the tools exist to support our work? Finally, what other factors should be considered in agreeing to retention commitments? Do we want to take into consideration those commitments from other shared print programs? As EAST continues to grow beyond the Northeast, should we consider geographic distribution? And what about digital availability of titles? Finally, are there ways we can bring a DEI lens to this collection analysis work? And as with the retention model, do the tools we'll be using for the analysis support including those factors? Or might there be ways outside of those tools that we can bring some of these to bear on the retention commitment decisions? As this working group winds down, we're ready to begin engagement more closely with both the full East membership and with service providers. We still have work to do to determine how best to consider issues relating to the diversity of the collection, particularly as relates to tools we might use to supplement the standard analysis offerings. We may in fact find we wish to use different tools for different components of that analysis. This group has recommended that at least some component of the analysis include the full collections of the participating libraries, although offering the option for libraries to volunteer commitments is likely. Over the coming months, we expect to survey the full East membership to gauge their interest in being a part of a larger collection analysis, as well as undertake more detailed discussions with service providers on estimating costs and getting a sense of timing. The second ad hoc working group established by East in 2021 was the Special Collection Working Group. This group was tasked with making recommendations to the East Executive Committee regarding expanding the scope of the East collection to include materials held in special collection locations. All of our previous work has focused on circulating collections. These recommendations would be focused on developing criteria for special collection material to be in scope for East retention, as well as updating any appropriate access and other policies relating to the management of special collection titles as part of the East collective collection. Following some initial meetings, we divided this working group into two subgroups. One was focused on undertaking a collection analysis pilot project, and the other looking at East policies and procedures. The first subgroup included 4 East libraries who provided extracts of their special collection titles to be loaded into Gold Rush to compare those collections to the current East retention commitments, which, as I indicated earlier, are from circulating print monograph collections. The data from this analysis was subsequently loaded into Tableau, a data visualization tool, to further facilitate analysis and discussion. Between the data in Gold Rush, which allowed us to determine the uniqueness and overlap between the special collections of these 4 pilot libraries, as you see in the table on the right, and East, and the visualization data that was available in Tableau, we were able to drill down into various characteristics, both of the individual collections and better understand their relationship to the current East retention commitments in circulating collections. As you can see from the bar chart on the right, the overlap varies from just under 18% to over 35%. The Library of Congress class profile on the left is in fact quite similar to that of the full East collection, with literature and history representing well over 50%. The analysis subgroup reviewed the capabilities and general costs of both Green Glass and Gold Rush, in addition to completing the pilot project. The policy subgroup completed an updated East access policy, which was subsequently approved by the Executive Committee. And based on an initial review of our current interlibrary loan best practices, we will be reconvening our ILL working group to update this document, taking into consideration the revised access policy. The Special Collections Working Group is in the process of finalizing their recommendations for the East Executive Committee. And although it is still in draft form and not yet formally approved, we expect the recommendations would include, first, development of an opt-in program for East libraries to include some or all of their special collections in East, a recommendation that any future collection analysis include special collection materials, and as a result of our pilot work, which showed that titles published since 1900 have a fairly high overlap with titles in circulating collections, some libraries may wish to include only post-1900 titles from their special collections. We will be asking East members to vote on the new access policy, and work with the reconvened Interlibrary Loan Working Group to update our current best practices so they are more in keeping with the revised access policy. The third working group established last year was one focused on access, a critical component of the East mission. In our program assessment, East members encouraged us to consider facilitating digitization of retained collections and to look at further opportunities for shared print content to be more easily discoverable and accessible across member libraries. Before I talk about the work of this group, let me quickly summarize access within East today. East is a light archive with titles held today in circulating collections. Our Memorandum of Understanding strongly encourages members to provide no-charge lending to their East partners. Our operating policies reiterate this, as well as make clear that digital delivery is a growing option to physical lending. Our current best practices for ILL were developed by a working group of experts, and we have in place both a rapid pod and an OCLC group access capability, or GAC, for East, both of which facilitate usage analysis. The Access Working Group was formed in the fall of last year and includes 10 participants, 3 of whom are from the East Executive Committee. After discussing a number of potential areas of focus, the working group determined to concentrate on 2. The first is on usage data. What usage data could East collect relating to access to the retained monographs and serials? How can this data be collected and analyzed usefully for the program and its member libraries? The second area of focus is on digitization. Should East work with member libraries to digitize East retention commitments in support of access to this print content? If so, how might titles be selected? What is the relationship to existing digital collections? And how might East support the growing initiatives relating to controlled digital lending across its member libraries? We are just this month convening the subgroup that will begin looking at the ILL data that we have for East from RAPID and OCLC. We hope in that analysis, and in some cases looking external to that data, to answer questions such as these. Does retention change the ILL pattern? Do retained items circulate more than non-retained titles? Does circulation increase the risk of loss or damage to retained titles? How many requests could have been fulfilled by a digital surrogate? Would seeing the percentage of retained items lent via ILL, both to East members and outside of East, be useful? Is speed of delivery or turnaround time important? Not just can we access, but can we access quickly? We also hope to undertake an initial pilot that will inform longer-term longitudinal analyses of usage data, possibly done in partnership with other shared print programs, as we know this is a topic of interest both to members of Rosemont and to the partnership. In looking at ways East can support digitization of our collective collection, we began by determining the kinds of reports East could make available to its member libraries in support of local digitization efforts. Since we have the full set of East retention commitments loaded into Gold Rush, we know that there are more than 827,000 titles in the East collective collection in the public domain. We hope to be able to work with both the Internet Archive and HathiTrust to understand the current status of digitization of these titles, and then begin to engage with East member libraries on ways we might support further local digitization efforts. As part of our analysis of ILL usage data, we also hope to understand ways in which this data could help inform digitization priorities at the local level. And if, as part of our work on the collection analysis side, we can better understand ways to effectively identify the diversity of voices within the East collective collection, we would hope that could contribute to efforts to make that content readily available through digitization. In all of these efforts, we want to stay in contact with our members who are undertaking controlled digital lending initiatives to discuss how best to support that work. As we complete these first areas of focus for the Access Working Group, we will be looking at multiple avenues to inform our members and hope to undertake a pilot project for digitization with one or more of the working group participants. We recognize that these 3 East initiatives should not be considered in a vacuum, and hope to work with the larger print community through Rosemont, the partnership, the CCH Collaborative, and others to collaborate on both our resource sharing usage analysis and our digitization efforts. On the resource sharing side, East sees opportunities to work with service providers and libraries to ensure that interlibrary loan usage data can be collected, shared, and analyzed. We will be sharing the results of our pilot project and have already begun discussions with others working in the shared print community on infrastructure and other issues to do our best not to duplicate efforts. While we're not yet sure of specific plans, we do hope to engage both HathiTrust and Internet Archive in our digitization efforts and look to ways East can support local digitization more directly. Your ideas in both of these areas will be gratefully received. And with that, I'm going to return to my first slide. Although we may not have time here, if there are questions, I would be more than glad to answer them. And if any of you have ideas on ways in which the work that East is undertaking in these 3 areas might resonate with local initiatives, we would love for you to be in touch and think about ways we could collaborate more closely. So with that, Matthew, do I have any questions?
Not currently, Susan. There's no questions in the chat or in the document, but again, feel free to add them. So we do have a question just come in from Alison. Do you have a sense of how the degree of uniqueness stroke overlap of special collections compares to your past analyses of general collections? I think you also mentioned overlap of special collections with circulating collections. Is that factoring into your thinking as you move forward?
It's a good question, Alison. There has been, over the growth of East, a fairly significant distribution of uniqueness across participating libraries. In our first cohort, uniqueness ranged from about 12% to about 35%, as I remember. With our second cohort, we had 2 very large libraries who had over 40% of their collections were unique within East, and that included all of the 40 cohort 1 libraries. Since the end of our second cohort work, I don't think I can quote specific numbers, but we just, for example, brought in our first state library. The Massachusetts State Library joined East last year, and their collection was over 50% unique as compared to East. Not surprising considering the nature of that specialized collection. As you saw in the bar chart that I showed, within the pilot libraries, the uniqueness within East varied from about 18% to 35%. So, you know, again, a fairly significant distribution across those libraries. That said, when looking at only materials published post-1900, we saw that rise to the mid-30s to mid-40s, as I'm remembering. So there's no single answer to that question.
And Alison says thank you.
Sure.
And we do have a question from Tom Kramer, who asks, is the comparative analysis of green glass and Gold Rush complete? If so, are the results shareable?
Let me just make sure I understand the question, Tom. The work that we did in these working groups did not compare collection analysis in Green Glass to collection analysis in Gold Rush. However, I guess it must have been a couple of years ago now, Matthew, East did undertake a comparison of those two tools just at the time that we were considering beginning to offer Gold Rush as an alternative for libraries interested in using it. And there is a document available, I believe, both on the East website and on the website of the partnership called sharedprint.org that includes, basically, it's a spreadsheet that compares those two tools in terms of functional capabilities. If someone else on the call has access to that and could post it in chat, that would be much appreciated. If not, I'll do so when I'm done.
And Tom says, thank you for clarifying. So thanks.
Sure, no problem.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Susan. We'll move on to our next presenter.